We all know that we're in Nigeria. No matter how hard you try, what will happen will still happen. The other day I was doing, I wanted to go for, an interview. Then I said, you know what? We are digital. Let's do it via Zoom. I'm so glad you already know what happened. Because if it was not Kukuruku, it was generator. If it was not generator, MTN. I switched to Airtel. That one was shaking. Glow, there was no bar. I don't know why Glow is even still there. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I don't know why Glow is still a network. Who uses Glow here? I laugh in 3G. We're trying to connect with Pastor Itwa, and something happens. Something always happens with Nigerian networks. We just hope that it works, because if I be a daughter of God, connect. Imagine if I'm talking and I think just show. You know, go fear. Let's just hold on for a second while they try to connect to Pastor Itwa. He's actually on the road, but was stuck in traffic because of the marathon that you people did not believe that I wanted to go for. And you are still even murmuring. You're even making things worse. You believe. Hey, God, full things. You guys are hurtful. You ask, what did you say?
Mama
With
Paro.
this hill? No, now, come on. Eh? You believe. Oprah. What's the situation? You just said not lie. You said believe there is lie. Oh my God.
Can you hear me? Well, I can hear. Yes. So what do I know? What do I do? Just go ahead and start. Okay. Sorry about the challenges of Lagos today and the marathon that has made transportation difficult. But I'm happy that regardless that I'm able to speak to you all today on your youth leadership conference, and we're speaking on the your mind and to make new possibilities. Perhaps the most powerful thing that God ever created was the mind of man. The mind of man. Man lives in his mind, he exists in his mind, he develops in his mind, he transforms in his mind, he creates in his mind, and everything that happens from the mind. The mind is the battlefield of life. The mind is the battlefield of my life. That's where the spirit, the soul, and the physical meet together and dwell together as one unit. So the mind is extremely powerful, and everything that happens in this world happens from the mind of man, from the mind of man. Sometimes they interpose or juxtapose the mind and the heart, the mind and the heart. Nothing happens in the heart. People just use the heart as a term of reference for gentility and kindness and emotions. They use the heart because it's such a powerful organ, powerful muscle in the physical presence of man. It is responsible for the movement and the circulation of blood, and the life of a human being is in the blood. So people talk about the heart, but it's really the mind that the action is, okay? And the state of a man is a reflection of the state of his mind. People who have succeeded in life have succeeded because they have a mind of success. They have a powerful mind. And most people who have failed because they have a mind of failure. They have a mind that tells them that they cannot succeed. They have a mind that limits their ability in themselves. So most of what you see comes from the battles in the mind and the treatment of the mind and the way your mind functions. It's your mind that tells you to go in a certain direction. It's your mind that tells you whether a lady is attractive or not, whether a man is desirable or not. It's a mind that tells you what the possibilities are. It's the mind that tells you good or bad. And what happened in the Garden of Eden was a change of the perspective of the mind of Eve and eventually Adam based on the new influences on their mind, the new interactions of the mind. God had created a simple mind, focused mind on increase, multiplication, development, dominion, and creativity of the earth. He knew neither good nor bad, and most things in that mind were good, good thinking, good thoughts. That's why the Bible says, whatsoever things are good, whatsoever things are wonderful, whatsoever things are nice, whatsoever things are pleasant, think on those things. That was the original mind that God created. But the mind can be influenced, and therefore there was a different influence on the mind. And that different influence of the mind that makes most minds want to do things against the will of God, we generally refer to as Satan or the devil or whatever. You could call it Satan, devil is a simplistic way of describing it. But the technical way of looking at it is whatsoever wants to make you not do what God's influence and mind wants you to do is what you call the enemy or Satan, wants you to go against God. So what the devil simply did was to convince Eve in her mind to do things differently against what God had wanted her to do in her mind. So there was a battle in the mind, and it was a battle of deception using the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, and the desires of man, the lust of the flesh. The thing was good to look at, the greed of man, the desire to want worldly things. And then the pride of life, the desire for equality and ascendancy with God. So the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And man fell. So today, for you to have new possibilities, for you to make progress in your life, you must start with the state of your mind. And that's why Romans chapter 12 says, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. If you do not change the way your mind works, it might not work effectively. The problem with Nigeria today is not really the problem of good or bad leadership, of the level and the state of the average Nigerian mind. The average Nigerian mind is still lustful, is still greedy, is still self-serving, is still desirous of material things. If you look at the law of averages, that is the emphasis of the mind of the Nigerians. And it is that average of minds that keeps producing leadership with that mindset. And that has become the dominating mindset in Nigeria. So for you to transform or to change Nigeria, you need to change or transform a majority of the minds for them to begin to think in a different way. I think it was Lee Kuan Yew speaking in the Malaysian or the Singaporean parliament many, many years ago, comparing Singapore to Nigeria. And one of the things he said was that the mind of the Nigerian was not on nation building. They were not able to find leaders that could convince the average Nigerian man to focus on nation building. Since when the British were in charge, they forcefully wielded the Nigerians together and forcefully made them focus on building a nation of Nigerians under the rule of the British. But what independence did was to fragment that thinking into regional thinking, because most Nigerians were thinking tribal, thinking regional. And then the regions came together and said, this is how we want to do. And there was no forceful uniting and unity of minds in Nigeria. The British didn't have enough time, or maybe were not interested in fully uplifting the minds of Nigerians, because it was convenient for them to leave the minds where they were for their own best advantage. So until we can upgrade the minds of the average Nigerian, the minds of the average African, we still will be struggling with our economy. What has helped China is an upgrading of the minds of the average Chinese. What has helped Singapore is an upgrading through the power and the will and the strength of Lee Kuan Yew of the mind of the average Singaporean. And the same thing is happening in the UAE and in Dubai. The minds of those people is being transformed. You leave the airport in Dubai, and a bold insignia on the airport says, Dubai, where all things are possible, or the UAE, where all things are possible. It's a working on the mind, so that each citizen of that place, when they look at that writing on the wall, they say, all things are possible. And it keeps their mind going, keeps their mind creative. And it's not the fault of the Africans, because this thing that they call First World or European development, it took them 1,400 years of struggle before their mind could be transformed by the glorification of Christianity. It was Christianity that transformed the minds of the barbaric Europeans. They were barbaric. They were idol worshippers. They were base people. They skinned people alive. They gave people to be fed to lions and to bulls. That's the Spanish bite. They had gods, Mercury, Saturn, Odin, Diana. They were goddesses. They had a god for everything, just like we do in Africa. It's the same thing. There was no difference. But Christianity seemed to have gotten to them earlier than us. And the force of Christianity from 00 AD took 1,400 years before a man called Constantinople, an emperor in Rome, finally received the gospel. And with that leadership was able to begin to transform the minds of the average Romans, who were the rulers of the world at that time. And that Roman transformation led to the universal church that they call the Catholic Church, led to the influence on England, which now finally having the Anglican Church, and led to the Reformation that we saw and the Industrial Revolution that followed, and then now the information technology revolution that has overtaken the world, and now all that on new Christian thinking. For your mind to shift, you have to be transformed in your mind. In our rapidly evolving world, where change is the only constant, the need for adaptation and innovation has never find ourselves pressed and limited by the limitations of our own thinking, creating invisible barriers that confine us to the realms of the familiar and the comfortable. And most minds are lazy minds, and they want to remain there. Your mind is a vast landscape filled with countless pathways, each leading to different destinations that you can get to depending on how you want your mind to work. The willingness to explore, to question, and to evolve. If you are in one limitation today, if you are in one direction today, if you are in one level today, it's because somehow or the other, you have not been able to work on to take you to where you really should be going. The truth is that the greatest breakthroughs in human history have always been born from moments of profound cognitive upheaval, a sudden realization, a paradigm shattering insight, a leap of imagination that defies conventional wisdom. Archimedes, in his bathtub, suddenly dropped a ball or something, or an apple fell from the tree. In those days, people had their baths outside in the sun under the tree, and he saw the apple coming down, and suddenly his mind popped, and he got a eureka moment and said, this thing, there's a force pulling this thing down. He says it's called the force of gravity. And that began a set of laws in physics, algorithms, and dynamics of motion that transformed and changed the way people saw things. Same thing, he saw a ball or so floating in his bathtub. He says, there's a law, the law of density that upholds something inside another thing. And it depends on how dense that thing is. And that began another source of exploratory laws that led to the conquest of the sea and the building of ships and the management of interaction of mass and matter that transformed the thinking of men. Socrates came with this evolution of philosophy and so on and so forth. But the greatest influence on a man's mind has been this thing called Christianity that shaped ethical thinking, that shaped what was right from what was wrong, that has brought us nearest to the way our mind was in Eden than we can ever imagine. We have the power to break free from the shackles of our own mind, to embrace the unknown, to question the unquestionable, to imagine the unimaginable. It starts with the willingness to challenge our assumptions, to entertain alternative perspectives, and to create a spirit of curiosity and inquiry. Many years ago, the mind of a man told him that if he ran faster than 20 miles, or if he was in motion faster than 20 miles, it was likely that his heart would tear apart. That's what the mind of a man told him. Many years ago, the mind of a man told him that the world had been totally flat, and therefore man just needed to continue moving along the line and he would get to the end of something. But man moved along the line only to get to the end of something, and that was the beginning of where he was coming from. So he kept on rotating, and then there was a mind shift. We suddenly realized that the world was not flat, but it was actually round. We were walking around the ball, or we were walking around in a circle, because we always returned to the same point. So it was this law that was in existence when two brothers called the Wright brothers, sons of a reverend gentleman, had an eureka in their minds. And the way they flapped their wings and the aerodynamics, that if we could create a set of things and make them, maybe we could create a vehicle in which men could fly. And the piggyback of a bicycle working in their garage for many years. And they said to their father that men will begin to fly. And the father said, impossible, because his mind was locked. So Ian Wright and his brother, through the exploration and exposition in their minds, were able to create the first airplane. Imagine a world today without aeroplanes. Imagine a world today that the mind of a young man called William Gates III said to himself, we needed a language on which computers can run. Imagine a world today without the Apple devices, the iPhone, the iPad, which I'm using to talk to you right now, using a Zoom, this thing that we are speaking through called the Zoom, 5-10 years ago was not in existence. It was just the mind of a young Chinese man who had a girlfriend that lived about 9 hours or 10 hours by train from where he was, kept on having this desire to speak to his beloved on a regular basis, rather than undertake an 9-hour trip both ways to be with her. And he looked at his device and said to himself, it's not just words I want to speak, I want to see images also. And was able to come up with a code that developed the first ability to converse on that platform. Took it to the company where he was working. It's a great discovery that was perfected. The company told him in their minds that this was rubbish, unnecessary, unneeded, a waste of time, to not go anywhere. And indeed, for many months, many years, the guy worked on this thing, and people, it was much of a thing, because the need for physical meetings was still at the heart of man, the heart of his mind. But COVID came, the whole world shut down. Nobody could move around physically like before anymore. And therefore, suddenly, what was thought to be not a good or necessary thing became an essential commodity. People needed to have meetings all across the world. Instead of traveling to meet one another, they traveled quickly on the device. And therefore, Australia, New Zealand, America, China, Nigeria, Congo, Kenya, all over the world, everybody would be on the same platform at the same time. What about social media, where everybody now has their own personal TV station? You want to tell the world something, you don't need to build a big advert budget on the CNN, a big advert budget on radio, big advert budget on the newsprint, which is being threatened. Carry your phone, say what you want, drop it on the net, and people will broadcast it for you, especially if it made sense, was interesting, was good, or sometimes was even bad news. So everybody has their own TV station. Make your skit, put it on the net, go away. You make your announcement, put it on the net, you go away. Do whatever you want. And you can be guaranteed that your audience, or at least a part of them, will get what you're trying to say. Shifting your mindset to create new possibilities involves a combination of self-awareness, intentional thinking patterns, and proactive behaviors. Here are some steps to guide you through the process. Number one, recognize your current mindset. Reflect on your beliefs, your attitudes, your thoughts, and your patterns. Are they working for you? Are they productive? Are you stuck where you are? Or do you need to influence them in a certain direction? Are you able to new possibilities? Number two, challenge your present assumptions about yourself, about other people, and so on and so forth. Embrace curiosity. A lot of people are not curious. They're not willing to learn. They're not teachable. They're not willing to be taught. Some people think they know everything. A lot of religious leaders, pastors, popes, they say, I know everything. I've been at this business 35 years, 36 years, 40 years. What can this little young Christian teach me? I know the Bible from A to Z. But guess what? We're doing Bible study this morning. We're studying Job, and Job chapter 14 or so, and reading where he said, if it is cut down, will it bud again? And he replied and says, nevertheless, if its roots are still in the ground, at the smell of waters, it will bud again. So I was asking my people, what do we think? What's the interpretation? My young son, 6-year-old, says, I have an opinion. I said, what is it? He says, it is saying that you live or you die. As long as your spirit is still in tune with God, you can rise again. My goodness, even I, 63 years old, had never heard it before. Here was God revealing something to a 6-year-old, Pastor Itwa, 34 years, 35 years in ministry, had never heard before. He says, whether you live or you die, as long as your spirit is in tune with God, you can rise again. He said, Hazen, say that thing again. He repeated himself again. When it was time for prayer, he used it again to pray with authority, with alacrity, with determination. He said, Hazen, do I have your permission to use this thing to preach? He said, sure, go ahead, Dad. Know that God is in this. That's how God is. Who would have thought that a 6-year-old can teach a 63-year-old new revelations from God? That's how God is. You must be teachable. You must have curiosity. You must be open-minded, number 4, to new experiences, to feedback, to perspectives. I said something about tithes and offerings and first fruits the other day, and all sorts of people have been making all sorts of comments. Then I got one that was a lady, very, very aggressive and very, very caustically at what I had said. My initial instinct was to switch it off and say, what job? But I said, no, it's why you must be open-minded. You must be open-minded to other people's opinions. You must be open-minded to criticism. So I listened through it.